welcome to the Talking Crop podcast. My name is Kathryn Seebruck, and I'm a commercial agriculture educator with University of Illinois Extension, serving Daviess-Stephenson-Winnebago counties. Talking Crop is a row crop production podcast, and episodes typically occur every other week during the growing season, but we're putting out some special bonus episodes throughout January to spotlight each of the presenters joining us at the Northwest Illinois Agronomy Summit, happening January 28th at Highland Community College in Freeport. The Northwest Illinois Agronomy Summit is a one-day conference tailored towards corn and soybean producers, agribusiness representatives, and ag agency professionals to provide them with the latest in agronomic research from university faculty and extension specialists. Our goals are to provide producers with applied information they can implement on their farms and to give agriculture professionals the knowledge they need to serve the farmers they work with. You can register online for the Northwest Illinois Agronomy Summit at go.illinois.edu/agsfreeport, or you can call our Stephenson County office at 815-235-4125. Registration is $25 and includes lunch. 5 continuing education units will be available for certified crop advisors. As of last year, this program has been adopted across the state, and you can find a list of all agronomy summits in the series at go.illinois.edu/agronomy summits. As mentioned previously, these special bonus episodes are meant to introduce you to our speakers and give you a taste of what they'll be speaking on at the Agronomy Summit in Freeport on January 28th. The first guest for our bonus episodes is Dr. Marshall McDaniel, Associate Professor of Soil-Plant Interactions at Iowa State University. His presentation is titled SoilBNB, How to Make Your Soils a Host for Microbes and Reap the Benefits. Marshall will be talking about the effects that soil health principles have on microbial quantity and activity in soils, and also the benefits to crops that this microbial activity provides. Please enjoy this special bonus episode of Talking Crop with Dr. Marshall McDaniel, who will be joining us at the Northwest Illinois Agronomy Summit on January 28th. We hope to see you there. Hello, Marshall, and welcome to the Talking Crop podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
You bet. Thanks for inviting me, Kathryn. I'm excited to be here.
So normally Talking Crop episodes come out during the growing season, but yours is one of a few special bonus episodes as you will be joining us at the Northwest Illinois Agronomy Summit on January 28th at Highland Community College in Freeport. We're thrilled to have you, so thank you again for joining us. This episode is an opportunity for attendees to get to know about you before seeing you at the Agronomy Summit and to get a taste of what you will be presenting on. So, Marshall, can you first provide us with a bit of your background and how you developed an interest in soil-plant interactions?
Sure, yeah. Full name's Marshall McDaniel. I've been started as assistant professor and now associate professor, so promoted a few years ago, but I've been at Iowa State for 10 years now, starting in January. And I'm a soil scientist in the agronomy department. My group studies soil biology, soil health, all things kind of agronomy related, and a lot of looking at how management practices affect those things that we want soils to do for us, including cycle nutrients, store carbon, and provide food, fiber, and fuel.
Great. Yeah, we have a lot of producers in this area of the world in Northwest Illinois who are, I would say, sustainability minded and have a lot of interest in soil health and how to enhance it and, produce resilient soils. So I'm really excited for you to come talk to us at the Agronomy Summit in a few weeks here. So can you be telling us what you will be talking to attendees about during your presentation? Your presentation, in essence, is how to make their soils a host for microbes and reap the benefits of doing so. So can you give us a bit of a synopsis of what all you will be covering as it pertains to that?
Yeah, so the title of my talk is SoilBNB, How to Make Your Soils a Host for Microbes and Reap the Benefits. And I'll be playing off the trend of, everyone's heard of Airbnb or bed and breakfast. It's where you can host people. I'll talk about how to make your soils a host for those wriggly and hard to see visitors. And we know those organisms are important for healthy soils, and the details on how to make them happy and measure their benefits are critical to regenerative or sustainable agriculture. And I'm glad that you have a lot of sustainability minded growers, as you put it, Kathryn. And I like to work with those farmers that do what I like to call farm weird. So do kind of outside the norm practices to really increase their soil biological activity and make their soils a host for all those wriggly critters.
Obviously, we don't want you to, tell us all of your secrets and your tips and tricks today necessarily, because we want to leave something up to the imagination for those who plan to join us in a few weeks. But are you going to be covering any specific research that you have been doing in this area?
Yes, I'll be probably using 2 case studies, some research we've done looking at the soil health principles. So most of your audience is probably going to be familiar with these principles. They were generated by the NRCS. It's one of their most famous soil health campaigns, and it really relies on these 5 principles, right? That are mimicking, or I guess mimicking isn't the right word, but they're modeled after getting closer to nature, right? So keeping soils covered, providing soils with the longer growing roots, minimizing disturbance, diversifying cropping systems, so including more crops, and then finally integrating animals, which is an important one. And I think one of the least studied ones that's particularly of interest to me lately. So we'll be talking about how those 5 principles are covered by different practices that your audience is also familiar with, like reduced tillage or no-till, cover cropping, even intercropping, grazing livestock in cropped fields too. All of those things help increase soil health and the microbial biomass, or just the amount of microbes that are there, but also their activity and their generation of nutrients and cycling of carbon and plant nutrients.
You just mentioned talking about microbial biomass and other, I'll call them soil health metrics. Will you be touching on any of the sort of common soil health tests out there, or is that kind of out of the scope of what you'll be speaking on?
No, it's almost like I paid you to ask that question. Well, I'll be talking about, so the one of the studies, the case studies that I had mentioned, we selected very common soil health indicators, ones either suggested by the NRCS, ones that are suggested by the Soil Health Institute, some that are used more by research institutions like Iowa State or University of Illinois. And we selected those intentionally, some of them that are kind of slower to change, some of them that we think are more responsive to management practices, and kind of put them to the test and looked at how well they predict what we should expect happen if you adopt more soil health principles. Some of those 5 principles I just mentioned, you should see improvements in these indicators. Some of them are very accessible that you can send out to a lab. Some of them are even measurements that you could do yourself. So we call them DIY or do-it-yourself measurements. One of them in particular, you could do with coffee filter paper and a funnel that most people have at home. And so, yeah, we intentionally selected those because they're a little more accessible.
And this is a question that's a little bit more theoretical and probably not something you'll touch on. But for my own curiosity, you're someone who studies soil-plant interactions and soil microbes. And so biological products and biostimulants are maybe not up and coming because they are currently used, let's say, but do you have a take on these as it relates to them enhancing soil health or maybe being used as a replacement or maybe a supplement to soil health practices?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best biologicals is just animal manure. Some of my colleagues that work on manure would appreciate that comment. But yeah, there are, as you put it, that it's a big trend, and it's been around for a little while now. At least when I started at Iowa State 10 years ago, they were new, but now we know a little bit more. And as a good scientist, I'll say that we always need more research. But there's my take on it is that the findings are a bit mixed. Some of these biological products work well in particular soils or particular environments. I've seen some research showing that how you handle them has a big impact, right? You know, a lot of them have a particular shelf life. They need to be stored at certain range and temperature. They can't be added to a tank that's not clean. So there are a lot of precautions that you have to take to see whether or not you're going to even see effect to begin with. And then this one I always find interesting. Something to think about is just the massive amount of organisms that are already in a soil. And sometimes I didn't get this. I came up with these from textbook figures, but also the Soil Health Institute says, on average soil in an acre, about 2 elephants worth of biomass. So all of those organisms that you can't see, plus earthworms and the ones we're more familiar with that are charismatic, we can see. If you were to take all those in an acre of soil, put them on a scale, it'd be about 2 elephants worth of mass, right? And so you're spraying a small amount of a particular organism that was not well suited to survive in a soil. So, it's going to be competing with all these organisms that have, been selected in high, low pH, fluctuations in pH, fluctuations in temperature and moisture, and these pampered microbes that are all of a sudden sprayed on a field. I think it might be tough to compete with those native ones, and just by sheer volume and mass as well. However, that being said, I have seen some evidence that these biological products can work in particular situations, certain soil types, and each product is different too in what they're going after. But I'm happy to take, that's not my expertise. I haven't done a lot of trials on those, but that's kind of my opinion, my hot take from the evidence I've seen.
Well, great. Thank you for those thoughts. I just had a conversation with someone about this, and I was curious about whether when you add these microbes, basically exactly what you were saying, when you're adding these to the soil, there's those native species that are already doing their thing and they're doing it well. So are these new microbes even going to have an easy time assimilating into that? And also over time, if they did happen to be in the right environment, do they assimilate into the soil? And now you have a new species or two that are hanging out with your native species.
One of the analogies I use is that, imagine if I were pampered and I lived in a giant mansion. This is not the truth, but if I lived in a giant mansion and I had a maid, I was being fed food that I didn't have to hunt, I didn't have to do anything, lived a great life in air conditioning situation, and then all of a sudden I was thrown into the Mad Max movie, right? Where like survival of the fittest, people are eating, dog food. There's no food out there in the desert, and that's how soils are. It's very harsh conditions where I think, at least in that imaginary scenario, I was kind of pampered, and that's what a lot of these microbes are. They're kind of pampered in kind of optimal pH, optimal temperature. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't explain that very well. I use that analogy, but you know what I mean.
No, yeah, I think that is a great analogy. It really simplifies it and I think gets the point across. And that's something to think about from a producer standpoint as they're evaluating the benefits of potentially using these products. Marshall, thank you so much for joining me again for the Talking Crop podcast, this special bonus episode. We're very thrilled to have you in a few weeks at the Northwest Illinois Agronomy Summit, and I look forward to seeing you there. And I hope that listeners listening now also will see you in a few weeks as well.
Looking forward to it. Thanks again for the invite, Kathryn. We'll see you then.